What comes to your mind when you hear the word art? I bet that Ally Zlatar from The Starving Artist will surprise you on this episode. She's using creativity as a source for change, challenging status quo, amplifying the unheard voices, and using art as a powerful tool for healing and advocacy. We sit down with Ally at the European Young Innovators Festival in Graz, where she's being awarded for using digital technology to bring artists together and spark real conversations about mental health, social justice, and inclusion. So let's dive into Ally's story and hear how personal struggles have turned into a global movement that has touched more than 50,000 people around the globe. Hi, Ally. I am really glad to have a chance to talk to you about the insight that has led you to start The Starving Artist and the inspiration that keeps on driving you all the way through the impact that you are making through your platform. So let's start by introducing yourself and what really led you to start what you're doing.
Yeah, briefly, just introducing myself. My name is Ally Zlatar. I'm an artist, activist, and what led me to start The Starving Artist was honestly like my own experiences of ill health. Growing up, I suffered from a very severe eating disorder for over 10 years, and medical practitioners, they saw a diagnosis. They didn't really see the person suffering from a disease, and my family was very traditional Eastern European, so mental health was not talked about growing up, and I found that for me, the only place that I was actually able to process, reflect, and engage in with what I was struggling with was through art. And from there, it allowed people on the outside kind of a glimpse behind the curtain. So I saw that there was this need for the voice to be heard, and art is such a powerful way to facilitate those conversations.
How was your journey in getting that insight and progressing to actually do something about it?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't plan on making a whole entire organization, but my goal was maybe to do a small exhibition with 5 other artists to see if maybe there's other people who are looking at this. But I had over 200 artists who want to apply, and I had the publication that I made for the exhibition get picked up by over 30 universities. So I saw that there was this need for the voice to be heard, but no one was really creating the platforms or actually making the space to facilitate these conversations. So it started to gain some traction from looking at eating disorders to health equity to really looking at that importance of art as a tool to really create advocacy and platform lived in experiences. So now we look at such a wide range of topics from migration and displacement to climate and yeah, I think really it wasn't ever going to be my intention to be a change maker or a leader, but my goal has always been to help others so they don't suffer like I did. So I think now that I have this platform, that's my mission now.
And would you say that the artists from that first experience that you had and realized that there is a need for the voices to be heard, were they artists from different kind of personal experiences, or were they also in relation to mental health or disorders?
So it was all really looking at eating disorder experiences. I think one of the main challenges, especially when we're looking at healthcare and mental health, is it's so stereotyped. You have a very limited media representation, and everyone okay, especially with eating disorders, there's no one right way to eat. Some people say if you have like a Thanksgiving dinner, you want a bite of everything. So you want to have a bite of turkey or mashed potatoes.
I come from the same culture.
But other people just want to eat one portion at a time. So you realize that everyone's going to have a different relationship with food. And so I really want to look at a bunch of different artists and their relationships, both the good and the bad of how we perceive our bodies. And I think while my voice, I hope, is important, it's not the only one that needs to be platformed.
So you're inviting different perspectives to be heard and then amplify that so that the world starts to look at
Exactly.
disorders in a very different way.
Yeah.
And how long have you been working, or how long did it take you from this initial exhibition all the way to here, and how has that journey been?
I started it in 2017, so it's not been linear. I think what we realize is that there's going to be different challenges at different points. I think what I always try to do is find communities that the work resonates with. I don't ever want to, say, force art in a space where it's not welcome, but people organizations, whether it's healthcare institutions or schools, or even sometimes political leaders, like they have to be really opening up to see if art can be a way for them to understand and engage in the topics. When it works very well. And I think it's just really trying to highlight that art is not just a pretty accessory on gallery walls, but it can be such a powerful way that young people and then even just people across the globe can be doing more of.
Yeah. So how does it exactly work? Tell us the process of the Starving Artist platform from the beginning, how you involve the artist and how you go to, I assume, institutions to actually also welcome the artist out there.
Okay, so it's different based off project and need. I think that often it's looking at how can we maximize the topic and then also the voices. So it's ultimately who are the voices and then who needs to hear it. So if we're working on a project, say for AIDS or HIV, we try to look at what demographics or what individuals can really bring a unique insight into the conversation. So all of our projects are open call based, and we really try to find grassroots artists. I'm not sure if you know a lot about the art space, but often there's application fees, there's participation fees, they have to ship their own artworks, and we don't
You
want-
mean then an
For the
institution is inviting artists to participate? That's the process usually.
Yes,
Okay.
and then they also charge the artist to
Really?
participate. Yeah, so all of those fees, yeah. And that's the irony, right? Where you put so much labor and love into doing the work, but then at the same time you realize that it's not going to get heard because there's so many systemic barriers. So we get rid of all that, right? We really just want to look at not necessarily what fancy degree you come from, but what is this voice that you're wanting to share. Once we get all the lovely voices, we have our intention on how to distribute. So sometimes it's better if we have, say, over artists from 30 different countries, we do it as a VR exhibition. So that way they can cross-engage with each other and be shared to different audiences. Other times it's like art billboard campaigns or workshops and exhibitions in person. Again, it's really looking at that full scope of art.
Okay.
And it's thinking about who's that a person that we're trying to reach. So
The projects themselves, are you initiating them or are you usually collaborating with some organizations that actually want to invite?
half and half, right? So the starving artists, I have some of my own passion projects that I love to pursue, and sometimes there isn't that space for it, right? Especially if eating disorders, there wasn't a space for it. But other times they're looking at things like menstruation equity or period poverty. We have some amazing partners in Thailand and Taiwan that really want to bring art into their communities. So it's a bit of both, and I think that's great about the work that I get to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like groundbreaking on a completely different level that people don't see. We see art integrated and we don't, it's like this builds our perception in an unconscious way, right?
Yeah.
And that's so important, the work that you do. But I'm very curious to go back a little bit because we're doing this interview for a broad world with potentially no understanding of how exactly the art industry and the relationship between the institutions and artists work. So can you expand a little bit? So what is the artist expected to live off if the inviting institution...
Oh no! Yeah, I think you see where this is going. Yeah, and that's the, I'm going to say, the satirical premise of the starving artist name, right? Not only was I the starving artist from an eating disorder, but the lack of artist support within the space. So artists are devoting themselves to the craft, but unless you get your name on the Tate, nobody cares. And so most artists do it out of love and labor, but no. Whether artists are often trying to fight for very little grants in the space. We know that whenever there's a government funding, art is always the first thing to get cut. So it's a struggle to actually pursue something in the creative world. And I think for me, I know that, and it's a pragmatic reality that I can't change anything about the rest of the world, but I can do something with my organization.
Yeah, but is the world of art and the relationship of the world of art changing at all in this digital age and through the work that you're doing?
Okay, I would love to be the person to say, yes, there is always going to be hope. There is a lot of art activism being done, but at the same time, it's also fighting a lot of the problems that we see with technology and then shifting dynamics online, which is a lot of art is consumerism and then very instant. So if you're on social media, you scroll and you see an artwork on Instagram, you double tap, it's pretty, what's next? But you don't really have that space to mediate and actually engage with what is that story that the artist is presenting. It's also how much can the artist either sell it for or get people's attention when it's so saturated online. You lose that authenticity and vulnerability. And I think what we're trying to do is still play with online because there's so much, but how do you maintain that genuine connection? And that's something that we're trying to navigate as everyone else is right now.
Absolutely. But you are a digital platform, right? So what is your relationship in your mission with technology?
I think for me, as a personal approach, I more so embrace like slow social media, in which I don't overdo it with like Instagram posts, but it's really trying to use the curated online space as a way to welcome people in the same way that I would like with an exhibition. So you have on my social media feed for the starving artists, it's more of a white gallery wall, and then you have the artworks, you have some key insights, but then also it's not just ending it there. We really tried to bring people to the VR space, to the artist profiles, to really, again, like, when you want to consume art, you want to consume as much as possible. So I try to give us so many different ways that people can have more than just the mere look at it.
And how is your digital platform in terms of a B2C experience and that consumer attention? How is that doing? Are you happy with where you are in terms of numbers?
I don't look at numbers. I probably should, but I'm more of that qualitative aspect of it. I know, right? This is it. Don't make me like in charge of any financial planning for. But I think what I really tried to do though with online engagement is looking at also diversifying resources. So we have online art-based reflection cards, online publications, and then the VR exhibitions to be as accessible and inclusive as I can.
But do you notice the receptivity of what you're doing online versus offline? Do you notice that it is growing or has its own loyal user base and that's what it is?
I think it's in person. There's this time and space that people are able to devote and really go fully in. And online, we see some of that as little hints or like seeds that are planted. So I think that online is really good at enabling and getting that attention, but then also a lot of it also exists offline. So it's really trying to play within the two.
And I assume from what I heard that the world is your oyster. You're not confined to a region or a country.
I hope so. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the great thing about art. There's no language barriers, right? So it's really trying to make it as multimodal as possible.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. And if you were to share your favorite or most memorable projects that you have done with other organizations around the world and included artists to participate.
Ooh, okay. There's too many. I think one of my favorite ones is the art billboard campaigns. It's really taking those private conversations. One of them that I focused on was looking at pharmaceutical waste. So in my eating disorder recovery journey, do you know Boots Pharmacy?
Yes. Okay. So I've lived in the UK, so I do know Boots. Yeah.
So I was their favorite customer, right? I would come out with 2 big bags of medication every single month because I was trying to get better, but at the same time, during that point in my life, I couldn't actually heal. So I had to have a lot of medication. Once I was more so through that recovery journey, I started to look at how much waste that I was contributing to, from the long instruction manuals to the pills that you pop out. And
that's such a unique way to look at medicine and pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. And as an end user, I was trying to get better, and I saw so much harm that I was doing to the environment. So again, it's one of these like really weird side projects of mine, but I really wanted to look at how can we as literally the people who are buying, consuming, have an impact within the pharmaceutical industry. I was able to put billboards across the UK and then also in Germany. And when you go outside your local, this is very UK specific, but like a Tesco or Sainsbury's, there'd be an artwork there that kind of confronts you. So it's really, again, getting people who may not necessarily go into a gallery aware of some of these issues. There was QR codes that allowed people to like go online and learn more about the work, and it actually got the traction of 5 of the top pharmaceutical companies. We were able to work with them directly as end users to make more sustainable recommendations and then more package consideration. Hey, it's art, but it can make a difference.
It's definitely like a tangible impact that you are achieving.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yes. I don't sleep, but that's.
So hopefully you're not consuming more medicine on that.
No. I meant more. I'm working, and I love what I do. Yeah.
There are so many kind of ways to talk about the impact. And obviously you already shared like, an important impact where you're getting across to the decision makers in the companies and they are changing their behavior for your work. But what about your personal impact? Because you were mentioning your eating disorder and that you were trying to get, what helped you to get well, really, truly?
I think, wow. I think it's multifaceted. I think just understanding that when you're suffering from a disease, you feel like you're digging yourself in a deeper and deeper hole, especially when you're looking at an eating disorder. There's like this negative cycle of like coping mechanism, self-harm, and then just trying to repent in a weird cosmic way. But art actually was that alternative way for me to get outside of myself. So some of my own art plays into that. So say there's one series that I've done called Saint Slater's Holy Gospel, and it looks at the church as skinny. So it's very satirical, dark humor, but it's saying that eating disorders have this like strict religious belief system you have to follow and you're prescribed to the rules. So it's thou shalt not skip gym day. And then I would, instead of having a Bible, it'd be like a scale. So it allowed me to really look at some of these harmful behaviors that I was doing, but then really understand them as harmful. Because when you're living through it, you don't always get to have that time to really engage with it.
What would you say transform your practices for yourself? Because from being the most favorite Boots customer to actually finding that cure for art, how did that transformation happen, would you say?
Okay, so I don't think it's a cure, right? Recovery journeys are going to always be a challenge, and then recovery is non-linear. I think what allowed me to develop my own art voice was saying that I need to be vulnerable and I need to be authentic. So being that person to be like, hey, I'm struggling. Here's my art. Here's me pouring myself on the canvas. And it's okay to admit that you're not okay. And I think that was that point where I saw other people actually gravitate towards. And not everyone's a painter or an artist, but they could see the art and be like, thank you for sharing that, because that's exactly how I did not know how to put into words. And I think that community and that way that art allowed for this place to process it all was the big thing.
But it's such an important message in the current society where we have all this technology that is stressing us out about the way other people live, and we think that we should live because of those standards. And it's such a good message to actually be vulnerable and try to express yourself in a different way to understand yourself. But going back to your platform, how do you, we're talking about impact, so I have to ask some questions about impact. How many artists are now part of a platform that participate?
I think project to project, we try to really cap it around 30, but sometimes you work with, say, 5 dedicated artists. Cumulatively, over 2,000, I'm going to say artists that are practicing artists, but through our workshops and our community events, over 50,000, I think, roughly. Through online engagement, we have exhibitions that get over 10,000 visitors. So we really see that there is these unique little pockets of the internet that maybe some people may have never existed or never realized that were a thing, but it's growing. And I really think that the digital is just such a unique way to start to facilitate that. And I think art, although very physical, it can exist online, and really there's this network for it.
And I bet that there are artists that are purely digital artists these days.
Oh yeah, I mean, we work with tons of them as well. And I love some of this. Okay, I'm not tech savvy, I'm learning, but I love just being able to use this as ways to even help myself learn more.
How do you help to monetize, or how do you take that whole organization of fees and artists being there to pay their fees to be able to show their art? How are you solving that problem for them?
So for us, The Starving Artist is a platform for inclusivity, and really it's at its core, it's art advocacy. So within my own setup of The Starving Artist, it's always been a goal of mine to not ever profit on the backs of artists who are being vulnerable and sharing your stories. The ways that we do make funds is through exhibitions, publications, sales, donations, and grants. But then all the funds raised that don't cover our administrative fees go back into The Starving Artist through the Starving Artist Scholarship Fund to help marginalized communities access inpatient care. Arts and healthcare can coexist, but then also co-create solutions for people on their healing journeys.
I'm learning so much here, really, when you're not in the space, but trying and getting a glimpse of it. So what's next?
What's next? Keep on doing what I'm doing. But I think realistically, one of the main goals is helping access more marginalized communities, specifically in Asia Pacific, because especially within the European lens, we have this very vibrant ecosystem. So trying to have more cross-cultural collaborations. So through Europe, but then also through a lot of these other demographics, I think is one of our goals. That, and then also really diversifying our topics. So looking more at women's rights, gender-based violence, looking at the SDGs, so climate and sustainable growth is some of these key topics. But yeah, it's lucky that it's all youth-led, so we really get to have that dedication to say where we actually want to go.
How many people do you have working with you?
So
Like as a core team?
as a core team, it's about 5 to 10. We also have volunteers that either come between, say, time periods when school's less flexible or more flexible. But then again, it's always just saying that we're welcoming people if they want to come pitch a project or if they want to bring something to the organization. So it's really just trying to be that organization that I wish there was when I was starting out on my activism journey.
And would you say that as you grow and as the time passes, of course, like you get more awareness and it's becoming easier or more difficult for you to find the partners who will actually invite artists to do the projects?
I think the awareness is there, but it's always about timing, right? So it's sometimes in art space, you're gonna have to plan at least 2 years in advance. So coordinating with different artists and host organizations have to be at the right synergy and at the right time. But when it works out really well.
Okay. And in terms of like maybe your insights into the space, when you started and right now, what are your key observations? What is the most surprising that you learned and is like giving you hope for the future in this space?
Okay, it's not giving me hope, but I wish someone told me at the beginning, Ally, real change takes time. If it was easy, it would already be done. I think that is something that I live by as one of my quotes. And I know that this work it's small in scale, but it really just builds the snowball. And I think that's something I always need to tell myself when I'm like facing an obstacle within the space, or just sometimes when you feel that burnout. It's painful, but it's worth it when you get to see the payoff.
Absolutely, 100%. Being a founder myself, I learned the hard way that it takes time.
Yeah.
Change, growth, all of it really takes time and dedication. And I have another semi-challenging question, but since you're an artist, that's maybe not a challenging question at all.
Yeah.
But if you would have a magic wand and you could change anything in your space.
Oh, I love this. I think more. Oh, there's too many names. So the anarchist in me says we need less formality within how we're approaching collaborations. So more trust in youth perspectives, especially. So often young people are either tokenized or they're very reduced in their capacity to actually be able to, heavens forbid that an arts organization that's youth-led works with a hospital that has this pristine reputation, but that's exactly where we get to see this innovation and spark.
And who is actually marginalizing or like putting the young artists into corner? Is it the art community or is it the institutions?
I think most often the case, it's the institutional structures themselves, because they've had a very consistent and long-term way of doing things. Young people coming in being like, hey, we want to do an exhibition and work with some of your patients. They're like, what? This has never happened before. So it's, here's our proposal, here's how we go about doing it, here's how we would love to get your feedback on how we can work best with you guys, right? But they're like, no, this is scary, this is unnecessary.
There are change, right?
Yeah, so maybe just a little bit more of this embracing of the youth, but then also that less reductive and less tokenizing, because there's so many talented and amazing and creative.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's probably the big one, but I can go on a rant if you want me to do more.
Maybe another one. One more, because by doing this, you're also sharing such interesting perspectives of, for me, that's the interesting part. I don't live in your space and I don't do what you do. So learning from you is super interesting, really.
Okay, yeah, since I have one more. Within my organization, I do a lot of the work, but then that other aspect of it is bringing it to the voices that need to hear it. One of the things I would say to that end is when I'm working with policy leaders, whether it be the OECD, UN Women, it's them having this understanding that art and creative voices, especially in their storytelling capacity, should be more at the way that we're doing policy reform. How are we going to be creating solutions that are really, truly person-centered if you're not hearing from the people that are these stakeholders that are the ones who are actually going to be the ones that are affected? So we see this gap between those who are in power and then those who are at the receiving end of it. So that's why this art space really helps reduce a lot of those systemic barriers, whether language, socioeconomic, financial, and we really get to see that if we allow more of that, say with that policy dialogue with the pharmaceutical industry, we see that it's so important that they actually have these spaces to meet. And we really need to have more of that, whether it be art or even just this industry and civic dialogue.
Dialogue and conversation.
Yeah.
But I want to now ask another question that sparked from what you just said. You're a young artist with an incredible initiative. How do you get to sit at the table with UN Women OSC and like how do you
I sneak in through the roof and then around the no. I think part of it is they're starting to opening up these spaces. So whether it be a youth advisory board or they have open calls for steering committees, I am stubborn. I am submitting in my application. I'm always saying, here's the work that I've been doing. Please, can we have a voice to have some sort of conversation? And especially within the last 5 years, there is this growing capacity, although at different scales and different topics. But yeah, it's really just trying to find those ways in. It's a challenge, but it's one that I'm working on, yeah.
And how much of your work actually is dedicated towards that? Because now the more we speak, the more areas you seem to be covering and getting put in the door. How you as an individual manage your time and manage to actually your focus? How do you choose what's the most important for you?
I would say there's this term called inshallah. It's if God wills it. But I think it's normally 70% is doing the work with the communities and the 30% is figuring out what is that best dissemination route. So sometimes I'm like, this is such an important topic that's very topical and there's this time sensitive project that is working on it right now. I would really try to dedicate towards that. But at the same time, there's projects that I've done that are on the HIV and AIDS that end up being really important 2 years down the road. So it's not a project starts and it dies, but just figuring out when's the best time to water the plant, so to speak.
So being an artist, you still have to be very actually prioritizing everything. Because from my own experience and just talking to startup founders, a lot of startups fail or are not doing so well because not actually focusing on the right things. And it's such an important skill or ability, natural or acquired, to be able to dedicate your time where it actually matters and focus on the things that matter for now and future.
Exactly. Adaptability and living by my Google Calendar. I think those are two very pragmatic things. Yeah.
So it's also the structure of a day and to-do lists. And
yeah. Thinking short term and then that long term impact you're wanting to have.
Yeah. Anything that you want to wish other social causes, entrepreneurs who are pushing hard to actually get their voice heard?
Yeah, I think just concluding thoughts maybe. I found my voice through creative arts. It's not the only way that we need to have reform within our spaces. But I would say what is the most important takeaway is like trying to facilitate whatever work you're doing both genuinely and authentically, because I think people are more welcoming and really resonate more when you care and you're able to show that through the work that you're doing. So yeah, a little cheesy, but I think it's genuine, right?
But it is genuine and it's so important because that's the kind of the key issue of people going and doing something for money or doing something because somebody else told them that this is the right thing to do instead of actually following their heart. So it's a very important and very relevant, I think, advice to startup, regardless if it's like a social or non-social business founders. Thank you very much. I really learned a lot and I wish you the best of luck through Starving Artists.
Thank you so much. And everyone else, feel free to reach out as well. We're always open to collaborations.
And with that, I want to invite you to join Ally on her quest to empower artists as important agents of meaningful change. If you have an idea about something you'd like to change in your environment or would like to act on a social change, why not talk to Ally at Starving Artists of how art could be a medium for change? On that note, next week I will be bringing you another story from the edge of impact, where I will talk to two co-founders of Corridor, a platform helping students find internships in Turkey.